That's all ready. And then we'll do the broadcast. That too. Okay. Hello, everyone. I see people, the attendees are coming in now. So we're going to just give everyone just a few minutes. See who else we have come in. And we appreciate everyone joining us today to review Readiness Manager. We have received quite a few emails and help tickets requesting training. It's rather difficult to get to one-on-one training with every single client, so we thought we would start with doing a webinar on Readiness Manager so that people can see it and get an idea of how it works. So we really appreciate everyone who is joining us today. And we have Lauren here, who is our Readiness Manager expert, that is going to review this for us. So we are going to go ahead and get started. You do have the Q&A down across the bottom of your screen. You should have that where you can enter any questions that you might have. And Lauren can address them throughout the webinar. And then there's also the chat. So if you can't get to the Q&A, you can put it in either place, any questions that you guys have as Lauren is going through this, and we will get those questions answered. So thank you, Lauren, for doing this. Appreciate it. I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to you.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Michelle, for letting me do this. I am excited about Readiness Manager. I don't know if I'm an expert on it, but I have spent a lot of time in there playing around and breaking it. So I'm happy to share what I've got and answer any questions anybody might have for today. All right. I'm hoping everybody can hear me and everything is good. If there is any problems with that, put a note in the chat or the Q&A so Michelle can see it to stop me. I have honestly done a webinar before where I forgot to turn my microphone on, and it was super awesome to talk to myself for about 15 minutes before I realized what I had done. So
I remember that webinar.
It happens. Michelle had to call me to tell me because I had turned off my email and all my chat so I wouldn't get distracted. Yeah. But hopefully today will go a little bit better. All right, so Readiness Manager. Readiness Manager is basically our normal housekeeping module on steroids. So we've added some additional functionality to help you all track and set up tasks better with Readiness Manager. And also with Readiness Manager, you have the added ability to be able to access the vendor portal. And this allows your vendors to be able to log in using a mobile device and see tasks that are assigned to them. And they can also mark these tasks as completed from the field. So instead of having to come back by your office to let you know when they've completed a clean or send you an email or give you a call, they can just get out their phone or their iPad, click on their task and click task completed. And that will update the VRM system to let them know the task is ready, and it will change the status of the property if you all have it set up to that, so that you all know in the office that the property is clean and ready for check-in. Now the vendor portal is optional. You do not have to use that part of Readiness Manager, but if you are interested in using the vendor portal, you do have to use Readiness Manager in order for that to function correctly. So today I'm going to take a look at the different pieces and parts of Readiness Manager, which will include where and how to set up tasks. We'll take a look at the vendor portal also, so you all can see what your vendors see when they log in. I also want to take a look at the Readiness Grid, which is what you all in the office will be able to use to monitor tasks that are being assigned and the progress as far as if they've been completed or not. And then I also want to take a look at the Readiness Manager report that can be run out of VRM, just so I can give you guys an idea of what that's going to look like. So we're going to go ahead and get started. And as Michelle mentioned, if you all do have questions, feel free to put it in the Q&A section, and we will get to as many of them as we can today. And if we finish the webinar today and you guys do have more questions, feel free to reach out to the help desk to let us know, and then we will work with you all to get questions answered and everything set up for Readiness Manager. So with Readiness Manager, once you all are ready to start setting your tasks up, they are done under the sysconfig section, property, and there's a tab that says Readiness Tasks. This is where Readiness Manager gets turned on and off, and also where you can set up and edit your tasks. Now, with Readiness Manager, even though you all have the ability to turn it on, my recommendation is to not turn it on and let us turn it on for you. And the reason being is because once you all have set up your task in Readiness Manager, the tasks that you all create will automatically apply to any new reservations that are made after the task has been added to the system. However, the system does not automatically update any existing reservations with those tasks, so that's something that we here at VRM need to do for you. So once you all have your tasks set up, don't turn Readiness Manager on. Just send us a ticket or an email letting us know you're ready to start using Readiness Manager, and then our tech team will go in, update all of your existing reservations so that we're sure we don't miss any cleans for reservations that were made back in the fall for this coming summer, and everything will be good to go, and then we'll turn it on for you so that there's a smooth switchover from the old housekeeping schedule way of monitoring your cleans to using Readiness Manager to monitor your cleans. All right, so with my system, you can see here I've got a couple of different tasks set up. And I went ahead and again set these up so I could have reservations in the system to be able to use for examples today. When you all come in and you're setting up a task, all you have to do is click on the Add New Task button here. The screen that you get is the screen that needs to be completed for the task that you're setting up. The screen that we're looking at here isn't complicated. There aren't a lot of steps to setting it up. The tricky part is just being able to think through how you're going to want to use Readiness Manager, and then making sure that you set your tasks up based on what you hope to get out of the system. So with the setup of the task, the first field here we have is the task name, and that's exactly what that is. It's whatever you want to name your task. I'm going to set up another one just for an example called inspection. So for my company, in my pretend realty world, this task would be, I have inspectors set up that are going to go in and inspect my properties after my housekeeping has been completed. So in thinking through things in my mind, I know that I need to have my housekeeping done before I want my inspection done, and that when my inspection task is completed, that's going to let me know that the property that has been cleaned and inspected and is ready for my next guest to check in. So that's how I'm envisioning using this task. So with those thoughts in mind, I've given my task the name inspection. The description here is optional. You don't have to put anything in this field, but if you do, it will show up in the vendor portal. So if you have specific details regarding what inspection means and you want to write those out, you can do that here, and it will show up for your vendors when they log into the portal. The next section here is the Change Housekeeping Status on Completion drop-down menu. Now with this option, it only needs to be used if the task that you're setting up is not the last task that you need to be completed for a property to show clean. So in other words, when your last task is completed on a reservation, you're going to want the system to update the status of your property to your is clean status. Just like our housekeeping module does today when your cleans are completed, and it updates your property to is clean. If you want the task that you're setting up to trigger that status change, you do not have to select anything from this drop-down menu. You just have to check the box here, required for following check-in. And if you forget that and you look at the choices in the drop-down menu, you'll notice that the is clean status isn't listed. So there is no way to select that status from this drop-down box. This would just be used if you wanted to change the property status based on another task that had been completed. So for example, if this was my housekeeping task and I wanted to set up a status here clean but not inspected, I could do that. Like I have here, inspection needed. If I selected that one, then when the task got completed, it would update my status to inspection needed. So at a glance, I could see, oh, the cleaning's completed, but the inspection still needs to be completed. But again, for this one, since it's the last one that I want to be completed, I want to check the required for following check-in box. So again, this lets the system know that once this task is completed, it's going to update the status to the is clean status. If you have more than one task that you need to get completed in order for your property to be ready for your next check-in, but it doesn't matter what order it happens in. So for example, if you have a housekeeping task and you have a deliver linens task, and you know that you're going to have everything done for your guest that's checking in, but it doesn't matter what order it happens in, you can set both of those tasks up, and for both of those, check the required for following check-in box here, and the system will automatically update the property status to the is clean status when the last task that has this box checked on it is completed. So if the linens get delivered first, the status of the property will not change when that task gets marked completed. It will only update to is clean when the housekeeping task gets completed. And again, if you want to do changes in status other than that, you can use the drop-down menu. The next checkbox we have here is the housekeeping task. This box needs to be checked if you want to be able to assign specific people at the property level to be able to complete your task. So this box would need to be checked in my situation for my housekeeping task because I want to be able to assign people to it, and also for my inspection task because I want to be able to assign a specific person or a specific housekeeping group to complete that task. The next box we have here is the automatically apply to new reservations box. And this one acts the same way that it does when you set up charges in VRM. If you check this box, then any reservations that are made for a property that has this task assigned to it will automatically get this task assigned to that reservation. So this one is also good for your housekeeping task, for your inspection task, for anything that would be required on all reservations. If you have some properties that don't have linens provided, then if you were setting up a linen pickup or a delivery task, you may not want to check this button, this box, I apologize, because if you do, then this task will show up on all reservations for the properties, even if they don't necessarily have linens. So just something to think about with that. The next section that you want to look at is you want to think about when you want this task to show due. As a default, the system selects due date based on checkout, and the days before is set to 0. So this means that the task, when it gets set up, is going to show as a due date of the checkout date of the reservation it's assigned to. And that's what the default setting is. However, you can change that based on the needs that you all have of when you need the task to be completed. If you were setting up a task and it was one to check the trash cans to make sure they're rolled out prior to checkout, you may want to set that up, and that may be done 2 days before checkout. So by selecting the based on checkout option and then putting 2 in this box, the due date for this task, when it shows up on a reservation, is automatically going to populate as due 2 days before the guest actually checks out of that property. You also have the option of setting up a task to be due based on check-in. This option is a good one to use based on when a guest is getting linens. So if a guest is going to be checking in and they need to get linens, you would want to have that task based on the check-in date of the reservation, because you wouldn't want linens to be delivered when a guest is checking out, because then they have no sheets and towels for their wonderful vacation stay. So for that type of task, you would want to select the due date based on check-in. And when this option is checked, then the task is going to show as a due date as to when the reservation checks in. These dates can be altered on a per reservation basis if you need to at the reservation level, and also on the Readiness Manager grid level. And we'll take a look at that once we get into those parts of Readiness Manager. So these are just the regular standard defaults, but again, things can be tweaked on an individual basis as needed. So for this one, I'm going to go ahead and set it back to due date based on checkout. And then the box over here is complete task at any time. This is obviously an optional box for you to check. If you check this box, it means that a task can be marked as completed through the vendor portal prior to its actual due date. So for example, if you have a guest that's checking out on Saturday, the 14th of March, and their housekeeping task is set to be due on the 14th of March, because that's when the reservation is scheduled to check out, but the guest actually leaves on Thursday, the 12th, you can allow your cleaner to go in and complete the task on the 12th, even though it's not due until the 14th, if you check this box. If you don't check this box and your guest leaves early, you can either adjust the dates of the reservation to change the due date of the task, or you can change the task due date itself if you would like to do that, so it shows in the vendor portal as due on the 12th. If you don't change the due date of the task, your vendors can still see the task is due on the 14th if they log into the vendor portal. They just can't mark it as completed until the 14th unless you have this box checked. Regardless of whether or not this box is checked, you all in the office can mark a task as completed prior to its due date. So this is just going to affect whether or not your vendors can mark a task completed prior to its due date through the vendor portal. And then our next section down here is our dependencies. So if you were setting up a task that was dependent on another task being completed first, you would need to set up all of your tasks, and then you could tie those tasks together. So for this one, since it's my inspection task, I want to be sure that my cleaning is done prior to me sending in my inspector to check their work. So for that, I will have set up my departure clean task, and I would select it from my left side of my screen here and move it over so that I'm making my inspection task dependent on my departure clean task being completed. Now what this will do is it will allow your vendors to be able to see the inspection task even if the cleaning task isn't done yet, but there will be an icon on that task to let them know that the dependency hasn't been met yet, and they will not be able to go into mark it completed until the dependency is completed first. And that's true even if you have the complete anytime task box checked. So even if this is checked, if the dependency has not been met or the task has not been completed yet, they will not be able to complete the inspection task. I hope that makes sense. Michelle, do we have any questions about anything so far?
Nope, no questions so far.
Okay, then I'm going to keep on moving. But feel free to let us know if you guys do have a question. Once you've set the task up here and you click Save Task, I need to give it a new name. You'll see it in your list of tasks under the Readiness Tasks tab. After you've gotten the task set up, if you select it, you'll see you have the option to edit the task, so you can always go back in and make changes if you need to. And then you also have the ability here to assign it to properties or assign it to charges. Now, with choosing whether or not you want to assign it to the property or assign it to the charges, there are a couple of different things to take into consideration. Most of the time, my suggestion is to assign the task to the properties, and if there's a charge associated with the task, assign it to the charge also. And that's because if you assign the task to the properties, you will be able to control at the property level who's going to be responsible for that task. And also you ensure that the task is going to show up on the reservations that are made for the properties, regardless of whether or not there's a charge associated with it. And what I mean by that is sometimes you might have a departure clean and you may end up cleaning the unit for free and not charging the guest that's there, for whether it's because they've won it as a stay or as just a compensation for a rough start to their vacation. So different things could trigger you needing to clean the property without the guest actually paying for that clean. We want that task to be able to show up on the reservation so that it shows on your cleaning report. And in order for it to do that, it's going to need to be assigned to the property. If it was just assigned to the charge, that in order for that task to show up on the cleaning report and in Readiness Manager, that charge would have to be added to the reservation. So with that in mind, when you're thinking about your charges and your tasks, just remember that the charge is going to trigger the task to be added to the reservation, not the other way around. So if you guys already have your departure clean set up in your system, you don't have to go through and redo any of those. If we take a look at my departure clean task and I click on assign charges, you can see when you come into the charges, you can select which type of charge you want this task to be tied to, and you can tie it to multiple charge types. So for my system, I don't have any cleaning set up as rent adjustments. I do have cleaning set up as guest charges. So when I click on guest charge, you see all the guest charges I have in my system, and you'll see that I've added this task to both my cleaning 100 and cleaning 200 charge. So this is going to tell the system anytime it sees a reservation with either of these charges on it, it needs to add my departure clean task to that reservation. And now it will only add it one time to a reservation. So if for some reason I've added both of these cleaning charges to my reservation, the task will only show up one time. The system will be able to tell that. And also in my system, I have owner charges set up for my cleans when my owners have reservations. So I have tied this task to my owner stay cleans as well. So again, when the system sees the owner stay cleans on any reservation, it will know to move this task over. And this task is what's going to show up on my cleaning report so that somebody knows they need to go in and clean the property. If I had management charges set up, I would assign those by selecting the management charges here. Also for my cleans, you can see I've assigned it to my properties. I have a small company. We're just continuing to grow. So right now I just have 2 properties assigned, Beach Times and Sunkissed. And this lets my system know anytime I see a reservation for either of these properties, I'm going to pull over my departure clean task. Now with reservations for these properties, there's a very good chance that I'll have a reservation for the property and it will also have a cleaning charge on it. But again, the system will only pull the task over one time, so it won't pull it over because of the property name and then pull it a second time because of the charge. The task will just automatically get added to a reservation one time. And then once you've gotten your tasks set up here, you have created your task for Readiness Manager. So it's not difficult to set it up. It's just tricky thinking through what you actually want to set up for Readiness Manager and how you want those tasks to interact with other tasks, like the departure clean and the inspection. Once you've gotten your tasks set up here, and again, you guys let us know you're ready to go, we'll turn everything on for you. But with this, as I mentioned before, because we clicked the housekeeping task, our tasks up, we can go in at our property level and assign specific people to our tasks. So if I go into properties, manage properties, select my office and my property, if I click edit and go to the housekeeping tab, I'm going to see who my default housekeeper is. So Jan is my default housekeeper for Beach Times, which means any task that I create in the system that has that housekeeping task box checked is automatically going to be assigned to Jan because she's the default housekeeper for this property. Now in my system, I've set up my departure clean task and my inspection task. Both of those have the housekeeping task box checked, so both of those by default are going to be assigned to Jan. Now it may work that Jan does my housekeeping, but she doesn't do my inspections. So I can go in and change who's assigned to the inspection task. And to do that, I'd go back into properties, manage properties, select the office and the property. And this time, instead of going to edit, I'm going to go to manage attributes. When I go into manage attributes, I want to find the tab labeled tasks. When I click on this tab, I'm going to see the 3 different tasks in this case that have been assigned to this property. When I select one of these tasks, I see who's assigned to it. So here I can see I have my default housekeeping group is Jan, and Jan is tied to the default vendor as Jan. My inspection task is also assigned to Jan because again, she was a default housekeeper when this task was completed. I can change this to someone else. So if I wanted to change it to Cindy, because Cindy's going to do my inspections, I can make that change here, click Save Changes. Cindy is now going to be the person who shows up as needing to do the inspection for reservations for beach time, but Jan is still going to be assigned as the person to do my departure clean task, and Jan is still going to be assigned as my default housekeeper. So if, for example, Jan decides to retire early and move to the Bahamas and no longer clean houses for me anymore, I'm going to want to make sure that I change not only who's assigned at the task level here, but also who's going to be assigned as my default housekeeper. Otherwise, if I don't change it here, then any new tasks that get created are still going to be assigned to Jan. So just keep that in mind if you have people that leave and you need to make changes for that. Changing the default housekeeper here is only going to change new tasks being created, and changing the person who's assigned to the individual task will change who's assigned to the task on each reservation. So if I want to leave Jan as my default housekeeper, again, I've got Cindy set up as my inspector, and then it could be that Cindy takes a vacation. So Cindy goes on vacation, I can still change Cindy's name on the reservation level. So if I make a change at the reservation level, it will not affect every reservation in the system, just will affect the reservations that may be checking out while Cindy's on vacation. If Cindy decides she's going to retire and move to the Bahamas and she's not going to do inspections anymore, so I need to change everything that was assigned to Cindy, I can come in here and change it to Marcia, and then the system will update everything that had been assigned to Cindy to Marcia. So that again, you can make changes across the board. You just have to think about the situation that you're making the change for and just make sure you update it in the right place. And if you have a situation where you do have a housekeeper or an inspector or vendor that isn't going to be working for you, whether it's for an extended period of time or a short period of time, or because they moved to the Bahamas, just let us know and we'll help you find where that needs to be changed, because sometimes that can get a little tricky just depending on the situation. I'm going to change this back to Jan, just so when we log into the vendor portal, we can see the tasks that have been assigned to her. Any questions about assigning the housekeeper or inspector to a task?
We do not have any questions right now, Lauren.
All right, thanks, Michelle. And I'm sorry to keep asking. I just don't have that box opened on my screen because I get distracted. So I just want to check.
Yep.
All right, so that is setting up a task and assigning your task, and then making changes as you need to who's assigned to complete the task. The next thing that I want to take a look at is the Readiness Manager grid. And again, this is what you all are going to see in-house to keep track of the tasks that you've set up. Once we turn Readiness Manager on for you, the Readiness Manager tab will automatically show here in the Quick Access menu, and it will also show under Housekeeping. So if you notice under my Housekeeping module, I have Readiness Manager listed, but I no longer have Schedule listed. When Readiness Manager gets turned on, it automatically takes the place of the schedule part of the housekeeping module. So that no longer works. And when that gets turned on, so Readiness Manager is on, and the schedule part of housekeeping gets turned off, it's going to affect your housekeeping reports. So I guess I lied. I'm going to look at them before I look at the grid. So with the housekeeping reports you all are probably used to running either the housekeeping condensed, the housekeeping exportable, the housekeeping condensed exportable, these reports. When you go in to run these reports, as I'm sure you all are familiar, you get this super cool red letters at the top letting you know that in order to run this report, you first have to update the housekeeping schedule. Now, when you turn Readiness Manager on, there no longer is a housekeeping schedule to update. So if you come in to use one of these reports and you go, oh, that's right, I've got to update it, and you go out to update it, there's nothing to update. And that's why these original reports aren't going to work with Readiness Manager. So with that in mind, we've created a new report that's called RM Housekeeping Report, and that's the report you're going to need to run when you're running your housekeeping reports after you've turned Readiness Manager on. And I want to go ahead and take a look at that since we're here.
Hey,
So,
Lauren, before we
yes.
look at that, we did have a question come in
Oh, good.
from Michael Long at Beachside. Is there a quick way to update inspectors? During the summer, inspectors are not regular employees, so they change weekly. Can they be assigned each Saturday morning?
Yes, Michael, that's a great question. So with something like that, my suggestion would be to set up a housekeeping group and vendor needs to be assigned and have that the default inspector for your tasks. And then when you come in on Saturday mornings, you can pull up your Readiness Manager grid, go through and look at the ones that still have the needs to be assigned housekeeping group and vendor associated with them, and you can assign them on the fly as you need to.
Great, thank you.
And Michael, that doesn't answer your question, let me know and I'll be glad to come back to it. But great question. So with the housekeeping report, you click view report to run it. This is going to allow you to run your report for an extended number of days, just like our regular report does. So if I wanted to look at what I've got going on for the month of March, I can choose to run this from March 5th through March 31st. So it's going to show me the cleans that are going to be due between this time period. And with this, I can select which tasks I want to include on my report. So with this, I can select one if I just want to see my departure cleans or if I just want to see my inspections. Most of the time when I'm doing this, I go ahead and run it for all tasks just so I can see what's going on. And then for the task status, now this is important. For your task status, if you are running this report for more than one day, you're going to want to leave it as all statuses. And that's because in Readiness Manager, the status of the task is dependent on when the task is due. And when this report is done, it's going to look at the current status of the task to decide what to include. So for example, if I selected completed, and I'm running my report from the 5th through the 31st, it's only going to show me tasks that currently have the completed status that should have been completed between the 5th and the 31st. If I select due, it's only going to show me the tasks that are due today. That is what the due status means for a task. It's due today. So if I selected due as my status and I'm running my report from the 5th through the 31st, even though I will definitely have more than just one day's worth of cleans, the system is only going to pull those cleans that are due today because those are the only tasks that currently have the due status. If I selected past due, it's going to show me anything that should have been cleaned but hasn't been cleaned. And if I select pending, it's going to show me everything that's due from tomorrow through the 31st, because currently those tasks have the pending status because they're not due today, they're due in the future. So in order to get a report of everything that's included, again, my suggestion is always to run it all statuses. The status of the task will show up on the report. So if you have a task that has been completed that falls within this time frame, it will show completed on the report. But again, that's my suggestion. And then with this, you have the option to run it for all housekeeping groups, or you can run it for an individual one, depending upon how you all want to share the information with your housekeepers. If you choose to run it for all housekeeping groups, we have the option here, just like we do with the original housekeeping reports, to have a page break after each housekeeping group so that you can run it once for everybody and then break it up by page so that you do have a physical piece of paper you can hand to each housekeeping group if you want to. And then the other options you've got here is whether or not you want to include the guest comments, the reservation comments, the help desk, the housekeeping notes, and the property notes. Sorry, y'all can tell where my mind is right now. So you can choose whether or not you want to include these on the report. And then once you've selected the parameters, when you click Run Report, the report is going to generate in our new form so that you have the option here. You can export it to Excel, a PDF, or a Word file if you want to. And I'm going to blow this up so it's a little bit easier to read. But this is what the report's going to look like. So it's going to show you the dates that you've run your report for. And because I selected to have a page break after each housekeeping group, you see I've got 2 pages. So it's breaking it down for me by housekeeper. So I have Cindy as my first housekeeper. And then under Cindy, it breaks it out by due date. So on Thursday, March 5th, I have a task type of departure clean for Sunkissed. I have the address of the property, or the housekeeping work order number that it's associated with. I see the name of the guest that's checking out. I see how many days have passed since the last guest checked out. I see the number of days between when this guest checks out and when my next guest checks in, which is very helpful for Cindy, so that if she's running behind, she can go, okay, I've got 2 days to complete this clean because I know the next guest isn't checking in until later on, and then I'll be able to get that completed for her. We see the arrival date of the next guest, the reservation number, the last name of the guest checking in, and the bed sizes are included on this report, which comes in handy if they're doing anything with linens. And then we also see here the task status, do not clean occupied. This is actually letting us know what the property status is or the housekeeping status is. And then we see the task status here, which is due. So we know this one's due today. Under Cindy, for the 5th of March, we also see her inspection task. So again, she's assigned to do the inspection for Sunkissed, and the same information is available for this reservation as the one above it. It's the same reservation. And then you can see the next task she has is when the guest checks out on March 4th. Again, she's got the property name, the address, reservation number, and the information about the guest leaving and the guest coming in. And if I go to the second page of my report, I will see the information that I have for Jan. So Jan's got a clean and an inspection scheduled for March 11th for beach times. And then for March 28th, you can see she also has a departure clean and a departure clean 2 for the Christian Test Property 1. So this information is still available for you all to be able to print out and send or hand to people. It can be saved again in a different format so that you can email it. There isn't a way right now to automatically email this straight from here. So again, you would still have to save it and send it as an attachment, but your vendors can use the vendor portal to log in to look at what's been assigned to them. Any questions, Michelle, about the reports or anything else that may have come in?
No, we don't have any right now.
Okay. So then going back to our admin console, back to our Readiness Manager tab, which is where I started and got sidetracked. If you click on the Readiness Manager tab, either here from the Quick Access menu, or if you click on it under Housekeeping, it's going to open what we call the Readiness Manager grid. And this is a picture of what you all have scheduled in the system based on the reservations you currently have and the tasks assigned to those reservations. So when you open up the grid, the default dates here, the due date start date is going to be today's date, and the due date end date is today's date. So what you're going to see when you open the grid is a picture of any task that's due today and any task that is past due. So if you have a task that should have been completed yesterday or last week or last month, and for whatever reason it never was marked complete, it's going to show on this grid. And that way you don't lose sight of things that still need to be completed. So it's that out of sight, out of mind idea. We don't want it to be out of sight because we don't want it to be out of mind. We don't want something to get missed. So the past due tasks are always going to show on the readiness grid. They're in pink and they'll show at the top of the screen so that you all can look at them and make sure that they get completed. Tasks that are due today, so that have the due status, are going to show up in blue on the grid. If I wanted to go ahead and see what I've got coming up for the entire month of March, I can change my due date end to the end of March and click Find Tasks, and it'll update my grid. So now I can see not only the tasks that should have been completed prior to today and the tasks that are due today, I also see what's coming up, so I can see my tasks that are pending, and these are going to show, well, sorry to say it's kind of a purple color, but my screen doesn't make it look very purple today, but it is in a different color so that you can distinguish between those that are due today and those that are due coming up.
Honestly, it looks great to me.
Okay, that makes me feel a little better. It's like
That's what my eyes see.
Well, thank you. I was going to say I turned 40 and I'm colorblind now. So these are going to show in a different color on the grid, and then you're also going to see the tasks that have been completed. So with this, these are going to be tasks that had a due date between the range that you selected and they've already been marked as completed. So I had a departure clean task that was due the 28th of March, and that's already been updated in my system as completed. So it's going to show on my grid. Now it could be that I'm looking at this going, wait a minute, there's no way my clean for the 28th has already happened because I know the guest is still there. So that must have been done in error. I need to reopen up this task so I can be sure it gets completed. If that happens, you can click on the little red flag here that says mark open when you mouse over it, and it'll open the task back up so it'll show again as needing to be completed. And then with this, we've talked about the dates. You can also choose which statuses you want to show on the grid. So if you only want to see the ones that were completed, I can uncheck all the other boxes except for that past due task status. We always leave that checked because we never want you to forget something that should have been completed that hasn't been. But besides that, you can choose which other statuses you want to appear on the grid if you're interested in something specific. Also with this, with the filter search, you can filter your tasks. So if I select everything again, and if I say, oh, I just want to see the ones that Jan's assigned to, I can put Jan here, it'll filter them out. So I just have the tasks left assigned to Jan. I can do that for the property name, part of the task name. So anything that's in this grid, I can put in here as a search field or as a filter. Excuse me. And then with the grid itself, you'll see going across the top, we have different column headings. And all of the column headings, except for the last one, which is the action column heading, has double arrows. So this will allow you to sort the information in that column, either in ascending or descending order, depending upon what you would like to look at it. As a default, the system's automatically going to sort the tasks based on the due date. So that's how they're set up in the system now. But if you wanted to see by property, you could change that and it will reorder your grid so that everything's listed in property order. I'm going to put it back to the due just so I can look at it that way. But here you have the reservation number. This is the task name, the property the task is associated with, the due date, the current status of the task, the current housekeeping status of the property, the main vendor that's assigned to the task, the main housekeeping group assigned to the task, and if you all have a key code set up at the property level, that will display in this column as well. And then our last column is our actions column. So by selecting the different icons in this column, you can manipulate the task. The first icon we have is a bubble, like a little thought bubble or a little talking bubble. If you click on this, you're able to add a task note to the task. And this note will populate through to the vendor portal. So if you know you need to communicate something to Cindy regarding the clean here for Sunkissed, you can put that note in there. Please be sure to check for pet hair. And we're going to add that to this task. And then when we sign into the vendor portal, I'll show you all where the note comes over. I'm going to update my task because now you'll see that my little bubble is colored in for this task. That lets me know that there is a note on this task. Because it's colored in black, I know that I've already seen this note. If Cindy sends a note back to me through the vendor portal, my little bubble will change colors. If she sends back a note to me that's a normal status note, it'll change to green and it'll have a number in there letting me know how many notes have been added that I haven't seen. If she sends something back that's a critical issue, it'll change the bubble to red, so I'll know that it's something that needs my attention immediately. And we'll take a look at that too once we get to the vendor portal. We'll send a note back. The next icon we have is a little eye icon. And if you click on that, it's going to show you the associated tasks with this reservation. So right now in my grid, because I've got everything sorted the way I do, my reservations are grouped together. So with this, I've clicked on my departure clean task for reservation 61, and then the other tasks I have for this same reservation are just the inspection task. So I can see at a glance what other things need to be completed for this reservation so that my next reservation checking into this property can be ready to go. The next icon we have is our double arrows. And by clicking on this, you can reassign a task. So this is something, Michael, that I was talking about a minute ago. If you have your housekeeper set to needs to be assigned and you all assigned your inspectors the day of, you can come into this task, click the double arrows, and you can change your housekeeping group here. So if I change it to Jan, it's automatically going to update to Jan on my grid here. It will automatically update at the reservation level and on the vendor portal. Now, if you've run a report and you ran the report yesterday, of course, that's not going to have the correct inspector on it. So that will not update. You'll have to run the report again, but everything else in the system will update. And if you run the report now, it will show Jan because you've made the change now, and that's currently who's assigned to the task. But this, again, will not affect who the default inspector is or the default housekeeper for a property or for a task at the property level. And the next icon we have is a change due date. So for this one right now, we've got it assigned to be cleaned on the 5th. If we realize the guest checks is extending their stay, we can change the due date here, or if they shorten their stay, we can change the due date here. And again, this is just going to affect what day it shows due in the Readiness Manager grid, on the report, and in the vendor portal. And then the last icon we have is a checkbox. So if you click on the box, the check mark here, it's going to change the task to completed. If a vendor completes a task through the vendor portal, it will automatically update the grid as completed. So it doesn't have to be completed both places. If the vendor is unable to complete a task from the field, or if you're not using the vendor portal and you all still need to make sure that you're updating the tasks in-house, this is how you would do it. Just click on the green check mark. It'll change the status from due to completed, and everything in the system will update accordingly. And we'll take a look at that too. I want to show you through the vendor portal what that does to the grid when it gets clicked. And I want to come back over here to our reservation column and point out that the reservation number here is a hyperlink. So if you click on the reservation number, you are automatically taken into that reservation. So if something needs to be changed on the reservation, you can easily access it from the Readiness Manager grid. And at the reservation level, if you want to make a change to a task here, you'll notice that the Readiness tab will be added once we've turned Readiness Manager on. And if you click on that, you'll be able to see the tasks that are applied to the reservation automatically. And again, this is because we clicked that Apply to New Reservation box when we set up the task. If we didn't check that box when we set the task up, so the system didn't automatically apply the tasks to new reservation, the task would show on the left-hand side of the screen, just like it works with charges that you all set up in the system that aren't set to automatically apply. And then you can select a task if you need to and apply it to the reservation. So you do have the ability at the reservation level to add or remove tasks as needed. Also at the reservation level, you can make changes to who's assigned to complete the task and the due date. And if you make a change here, it will update on the Readiness Manager grid. And the same is true for the dates. If we change the date here, it would update on the grid. So Michael, this is another way you can go in to make your changes, but it probably would be a lot easier to do it through the grid so that you can just see everything at one time instead of going into the individual reservations. But you do have the option to make changes here. And since we made our changes, if we click to refresh our grid, we're now going to see that that task that I've lost, oh, because I changed the date. I've lost my task.
I think you changed that one. Was it reservation 61, the departure clean to 3-6 instead of 3?
Oh, thank you. Mm-hmm. Thank you. And here now it's pending. Thank you very much, Michelle. I'm so glad you're paying attention. Yes, so I changed it to 3-6 instead of 3-4. So it's still showing on my grid. The status is now pending because a task is due tomorrow instead of due today. And we can see that it's assigned to Cindy. So I thought I changed that to Jan, but maybe I didn't. But it should update here.
I'm sorry, I did miss that part. I do have a question.
Oh, good. Yes.
If you add a maintenance task linked to a maintenance work order, Does that show up on the grid?
Yes, it does. That's a really good question. All housekeeping work orders automatically show up on the Readiness Manager grid, in the vendor portal, and on the housekeeping report. Maintenance work orders do not show up on the Readiness Manager grid or the report unless you've added the task maintenance to that work order. And if that's something people are interested in, let me know, and I'll be glad to walk you through that separately. Just because of time, I don't know that I'll be able to get into that today. But yes, in order for a maintenance work order to show on the grid, you do have to add a task to the work order to get it to show. But maintenance work orders all show on the vendor portal. So if you want your vendors to be able to see maintenance work orders that have been assigned to them, they can do that through the vendor portal without you having to add the maintenance task to the work order and assigning it through the grid. Does that answer the question?
I believe so.
Okay.
Again, Patty, if you have any additional questions, just let us know.
Yes, and I'll be happy to work with you, Patty, on that and to show you how to get that set up.
Thank you, Lauren.
Oh, we have another question. I saw the thing pop up.
Oh, she said yes, thank you. That answered her question.
Thanks, Patty. All right, so that is the grid. And now I want to take a look at the vendor portal. But before I leave, I do want to point out that there is an icon legend. So if you forget what all of these things do, you can click on that to see what everything stands for. And also it lets you know what the other icons are that I just completely forgot to mention. If you have the little boxes, arrows here that make a box, this lets you know it's a back-to-back reservation. So you've got somebody checking out on the 4th and somebody checking in the same day. The little sunburst here will indicate that it's a required task, which means you all have checked that required for next check-in box. So it has to be completed before the property is ready for your next check-in. And if you were to see the little rook or the little castle, you would know that it was an owner reservation, and that would display over here by the reservation number. And also you can see that we have an icon to let you know if it's a housekeeping work order or a maintenance work order. And if you had either one of those, they would show in this column with the actions, and clicking on those icons would actually open those work orders if you needed to access them through the grid. All right, so now I want to take a look at the vendor portal. Now with the vendor portal, in order for your vendors to be able to access the vendor portal, they have to be set up in the system under maintenance and vendors. So with that, if you guys have your housekeeping groups set up and you want your housekeeping groups to be able to view their tasks through the vendor portal, you also need to set up a vendor with the same name as your housekeeping group so that you can tie them together so that they can log in and see what's assigned to them. And you'll see under vendors, I have Cindy, Jan, and Marcia all set up as vendors, and they're also set up as my housekeeping groups. So Cindy as my housekeeping group is tied to my vendor Cindy. So this allows Cindy's name to show up on my housekeeping report, because that's going to be pulled by the housekeeping group, and also allows Cindy to be able to log into the vendor portal, because the vendor portal is accessed by the username and password set up on the vendor profile. So you have to have your housekeepers tied to a vendor in order for them to be able to log into the vendor portal to see what's assigned to them. And if that doesn't make sense, let me know, and I'll try to explain that better. But going back to our Manage Vendor section, so for this one, we'll take a look at Jan. If you select your vendor and click Edit, you're going to see the username and password as part of the profile, and this is what they're going to use to access the vendor portal. So this has been part of VRM for a very, very long time, because our wonderfully intelligent developers knew this was coming, so they already have these fields included. So any vendors that you all already have set up in your system already have a username and password. It just didn't connect to anything until now. So you will need to pass on the vendor their username and password, and the other piece of information they're going to need to access the vendor portal is your client code. And your client code is found at the bottom left section of your dashboard or your admin console, and it's usually the name of your company or some variation of that. And with those 3 pieces, they can access the vendor portal through any mobile-friendly device. And the URL for the vendor portal is vendorportal.vrmgr.com. And then they'll need to enter their username and password. Actually, let me do Cindy because we put a note on hers. Cindy, and then my client code. And then when Cindy logs in, she's going to see her dashboard. If she's using a mobile device, I do want to point out that this screen is responsive. So it will adjust based on the size of the screen the person's using. So if they're using a phone and the screen is much more narrow than my computer screen, the icons will rearrange and will be vertical instead of horizontal, just so it's easier to see and navigate. When Cindy logs in, she'll have 4 options here on her screen. She can see the tasks that are assigned to her. She can see the past due task. She can manage users, or she can edit her profile. Now, the tasks that show up under the past due tasks are also included under the view assigned. So if Cindy had anything that was past due, it would show in this number and would be included in the grand total of 6. So Cindy doesn't have anything past due. Super cool. If we click on the view assigned tasks, we can see what's been assigned to her. When we go in, each task has its own little square. So each square is going to tell you the name of the property, whether it's a housekeeping task or a different type of task. The R61 lets us know it's reservation 61. And here you see this little broken chain link, and it says dependency not met. So this lets me know that this task cannot be completed yet because whatever has to be completed first still hasn't been finished. So if I click on my task, I can go in to see this is my inspection task, that my dependency hasn't been met, so I know that the cleaning hasn't been done yet on this task, and will notice there is no way to complete this task. If this task was ready for me to complete it, I'd have an additional green box down here that would let me complete the task. So I'm going to go back out so we can look at one that is ready to be completed. And you can see this next task has my property name, reservation number. It's pending, so we know that it's not due until March 6th. And if I click on it, I can see this is my departure clean task. I can see under the summary section that the task status is pending. The current housekeeping status of my property is do not clean occupied. The guest that's currently in the property is Kitty Boyd. This task needs to be completed by March 6th. My guest stayed from the 1st of March through the 5th. I see my bed sizes, the key code, if it's available, and who this task is assigned to. Under the task notes section, you'll see we have a green bubble with the number 1 in it. This lets me know that there has been a note added to this task that I haven't seen yet. And if I click on it, you'll see I can see the note that I added through the readiness grid. Please be sure to check for pet hair. Now with this, I can respond back to the wonderful people in the office checking my grid. And to do that, I can click on the report a problem and I can send a message back. No pet hair, smiley face.
Lauren, can we look at that drop down real quick for the priority?
Yes. This one?
Yep.
Yes. So with the priority, if you send a message back, you can set it as a default priority, low, high, critical, or a safety issue. If you send it back as a default, the low or the high, it's going to come into the grid as a green bubble. If you set it as a critical issue or a safety issue, it'll come into the grid as a red bubble. So I'm going to set this one to critical just so we can take a look at it back on the grid, what it shows. And again, this way you can just communicate back to the office without having to make a telephone call or send a text message. You're already in the vendor portal. It's just a great way to get communication out. And if you're sending a message back and your vendor has an email address associated with them, an email will also be sent to who you've got set up through the system configuration section of VRM. So it doesn't just show up on the grid, an email is also going to be sent back to the office. And for your vendors out in the field who have the capability of taking a picture with their mobile devices, you can upload pictures to the message that's being sent back. So if they have a picture saved to their phone or mobile device, you can click on choose file and add that picture to your message. Or if you click on choose file and you can take a picture with your mobile device, you'll have the option of taking a picture, so you can take a picture and send it back. So if you want to say something like glass broken in living room, you can click on choose file, click on take a picture of that. You do that. Oh, let me see if I have a picture I can send back real fast, just so you can see it. Okay. I can send a picture of my family because we're broken in the living room, I guess. If you do that and click report event, and I'm going to jump back to the readiness grid just so you all can see this. See, it comes in as a red bubble. It's a critical issue. I have a message I haven't seen. If I click on that, I'm going to see my notes. Be sure to check for pet hair. And then I see the critical message that got sent back, broken glass in living room. And here's the picture of my broken glass. So apparently they dropped a picture frame and they broke the glass. But that can easily be communicated back to the office. Does that answer, Michelle, your question and interest in seeing the drop downs? Okay.
Thank you for pointing that out.
You're welcome.
While I already have you interrupted, can I ask you a question that came in from Michael?
Yes.
Through the vendor portal, can the housekeeping group run a report for future date periods?
That's an excellent question, Michael. Right now, there is not an ability to run a report through the vendor portal. It is something we've asked about having added for an enhancement, and I think it's going to be coming one of the next releases for the vendor portal, but I don't know when that's going to happen. However, when your vendors log on and they click on the view assigned tasks, they can see things that have been assigned to them up to however far in the future you would like for them to be able to see that. And that's something, and I apologize, I should have pointed this out when we were looking at the maintenance section. In the VRM system, under maintenance, in the manage vendors portal, the portal settings here will let you control how far into the future and how far back they can see tasks that have been assigned to them. So if you want your vendor to be able to see things, right now it's set to a default of 30 days, they can see tasks that have been assigned to them that are due within the next 30 days. You can change that to 15, you can change that to whatever you would like for it to be. I know some companies like to give their housekeeper a heads up well in advance of what's coming so that they can plan their staff accordingly. Other companies like to just show them a little bit at a time because they get overly eager and try to go in and clean stuff before the guest checks out. So you do have the ability to control how far into the future they can see tasks, but through the vendor portal right now, there isn't a way to run a report for specific dates. The only reports that can be run is the one through the admin console. Good
Thank
question.
you, Lauren.
Mm-hmm.
And this one, just to pick up where we were just at, do the pictures save to the reservation or the property notes? I believe the answer to that is they save to the task that we complete.
That's correct. Yes, that's correct. So it does not get tied to the reservation or any other part in VRM. It's just tied to the task. And again, if you've got everything set up, it will be included in the email that gets sent to your company. And I closed my email prior to this, but let me see if I've got that set up so I can show you all what that email will look like coming in. Let's move that over. I'll give it a second, and then if it does, I'll show that. Oops, here we go. Here we go. Okay, so I'm set up. Cindy's got an email so that when she sends the message, it goes automatically to the vendor portal. I'm sorry, from the vendor portal to the readiness grid, and it also comes in to my email. With this, if I right click and download pictures, I can see the picture that she sent. So it's going to come in, again, it comes into my email because I'm set up under sysconfig at the company level to receive emails.
Thank you, Lauren.
Mm-hmm. Great questions. The other sections that we have in the vendor portal are the directions to the property, which if they click on that, they'll have access to it. And then they also have the ability to see housekeeping notes on the reservation, reservation comments, and guest comments. And all of these can be controlled by you all. So if you don't want your vendors to be able to see the reservation comments or the guest comments, you can control that under maintenance. Again, manage the vendor portal, and the portal permissions. So here under the view directions, you can say, yes, you're going to let all your vendors and all the vendor employees see them. The same is true for the guest comments, the housekeeping notes, and the reservation comments. You can also here, you can see, give your vendors the ability to add employees or delete employees. And this gives your vendors the ability to go into the vendor portal and set up employees that are working for them. So I'm logged in as Cindy, but if Cindy has people that work for her, and if you all have given her the ability to do this, she can go under the user section and she can add an employee that works for her. Oh, it's always good when I use the same address twice. All right, so your vendors can come in and set up employees. So if you all assign tasks to Cindy to clean, Cindy has her own crew of people that work for her, and Peter works for Cindy. Once you've assigned the task to Cindy, Cindy can come into the vendor portal, and you'll see now, because I've added Peter, she has the ability to click on the assignment section here, and she can assign this to one of her employees. This will not affect what you all see in the office. So on the Readiness Manager grid, excuse me, it's still going to show assigned to Cindy. It's only going to show here as assigned to Peter, excuse me, through the vendor portal. So when Cindy logs into the vendor portal, she's still going to see this task because for all practical purposes, it's assigned to her by you all, the company. When Peter logs in, he's going to see just this one task because that's the only one that's assigned to him. So he can log in, he can see all the same information that Cindy can, and then depending on the permissions that you all have set up, he can see the directions, the housekeeping notes, the comments, and the guest comments. Across the bottom here, you'll see we have 4 different colored buttons. The report a problem button is one we just looked at. That's what they would click on to send a note back to you all in the office. The reassign button is only allowed to show up here if you allow your vendors to reassign tasks to their employees. So they can reassign it here, just again by selecting the employee to assign it to. And then the other 2 buttons we have here is our on-site and our marked finish button. The on-site button can be used so that your vendor can notify you all in the office if they're on site. So if Peter goes in to make this clean, he can click on site. And then on our readiness grid, if we update it, we're going to see that that task has been changed to yellow. So this is letting me know that it's on site, my person is there to clean it, and they're currently on site to do so. If we go back to our vendor portal, and Peter's now finished, he can change, he can click on leave site, but then to mark the task finished, he actually has to click on the mark finished box. So just leaving the site isn't going to update the task. Once he's finished, he'll need to change this and click on the marked finished box. And now if we go back out to the dashboard of the vendor portal, we can see this task is finished. It's now in blue, so we know it's been completed. No, I'm sorry, this is the one that's due today. The one that he finished is over here. It's been completed with a little checkbox. I apologize. Checkbox will indicate that it's been completed. And if we go back to our readiness grid and update that, we'll now see that that has been completed. The color has changed to green and the status has now been changed to completed. I realize we are just over an hour already, and I think I have at least hit all the major parts of Readiness Manager. I'm sure that you all probably have questions specifically to how you all might want to use it. If you do, I'm happy to take questions now, or if you want to contact the help desk, I'll be happy to answer them that way. And Michelle, if we need to do another webinar to finish going over things, I'm happy to do that. I just don't want to keep going on because I know people's time is precious today.
Yep, I appreciate that, Lauren. So I don't have any other open questions right now.
Okay.
So I think we are good there. And then, yes, if if everyone is interested, we can do another webinar to talk more about the vendor portal, go into more detail. So we are more than happy to do that. So if there's no other questions, we really appreciate all of your time today. And like Lauren said, if you have any questions that come up, please don't hesitate to send us a help ticket and we will do our best to help. Thank you,
That's
Lauren,
right.
for all that.
You're welcome. And also let me point out real fast that in the knowledge base, we do have articles about Readiness Manager and the vendor portal. So these are accessible to all of you all, and that may tie into something that you have a question about or just may provide some more details. So I just wanted to point that out as a resource also. I don't mind at all answering questions or doing another webinar, but again, just wanted to let you guys know all the resources that were available.
That's perfect. Thank you so much, everyone, and I hope you all have a great day.
Thanks, y'all. Bye.
Bye-bye.